It's Morph'en time! Morph'en time! Morph'en time! Come on, I have the extra power pack on here. Maybe we'll try the Game Boy.
Hey everyone, it's Spammer D, and I gotta say, what a month for nerdom. Am I right? We got the release of Nintendo's newest console, the Switch, and the debut of a new Power Rangers movie in theaters. Yeah, that's right, the Power Rangers are back. Though, I guess they never really left though, did they? How many teams have there been now? I kind of feel like they might be recycling some themes. Well, how about this? The mighty Morph'en Rangers are back, and they're bringing something new. Though, let's be real here, they're kind of banking that the nostalgia will be back too. And it worked! But that nostalgia is gonna have to share. Share with the nostalgia I have for Nintendo. Because with the launch of any new system comes the next phase in the console wars. So I figure, why not celebrate them both by bringing back a little bit of that classic console war shenanigans, and have a little battle of our own. A return of the battle between Sega and Nintendo. But we actually have a rare opportunity on our hands, because unlike most games in the Genesis and SNES library, Power Rangers, both the regular and movie adaptations, didn't just get console releases. No, they got handhelds as well. That's right, a version of the game on SNES and Game Boy, and a completely different version of the game on Genesis and Game Gear. Though we'll only be looking at the movie versions here because, obviously, that's what the hype is right now. In real talk, I have been dying for an excuse to put these games head to head, because, let's be real here, they're the best. So, I'm glad that Power Rangers is finally back on everyone's mind again. But with that said, let's ease into it with the handheld versions first. And hoo boy, this is gonna be kinda hard to do, because these games are like comparing apples and oranges. Now one's mostly a tournament fighter, and the other is an action platformer. So obviously, they don't have that much in common outside of starring the Power Rangers, and being based on the movie. Even though, that's still kind of pushing it. Yeah, I know, surprising. You would think that regardless of the genre, these games would at least share the same story. You know, the one based on the movie? But that would be giving them, well, one of them, too much credit. Now, to be fair, neither of these games, no, scratch that, none of the Power Rangers the movie games fully follow the plot of the movie. But the titles under the Sega flagship at least get it half right. In the Game Gear adaptation, the first 3 levels start out the same way. Lord Zed tells a monster to capture the Rangers, and then you proceed to fight said monsters. Now this at least follows the structure of the show, but then so did the previous game. In fact, that was pretty much all of the previous game. But since this title is supposed to be based on the movie, it's kind of a problem. A small problem, but one I'm going to be pretty petty about nonetheless. I paid for the movie. I want to play the movie. But, as I said, the game at least gets it half right. The movie storyline actually kicks up after the 3rd level. You know, halfway through the game. But at least it's there. There are some cutscenes, a few missed opportunities. Like, seriously, why are none of these characters fighters? And then, after all of that, we get some actual battles based on what we're actually here for. And it works. We'll get a bit more into it when we look at the gameplay, but rest assured, it's good. The Game Boy version, however, is not. Neither this version nor its Super Nintendo counterpart seem to even know that they're supposed to be about the movie at all. I think I counted 3, maybe 4 acknowledgements to the movie here. You fire the game up and you find yourself at a Mega Man-esque level select, where here we do see that one of the bosses is that pig guy that was only in the movie and never really in anything else, but even Power Ranger fans don't care about him. There's a Tengu, which this game identifies as the Tango Queen. Again, the only game to acknowledge the Tengus, so there is that. And Zed and Gold are in the movie, I guess, so... Ooh, but look at this one. This one has the Power Rangers up against their greatest nemesis of all, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. No, seriously, does that not look like Splinter or what? And look at his stage, it's in the sewer. And it even has Mousers! And then there's the final boss, Ivanus. I am of course pointing out all these bosses because, well, that's pretty much everything in the game relating to the movie, the actual bosses. The only other thing is that the Rangers are in their ninja suits, until they morph, which, by the way, are represented all wrong. Showing how much of a badass I am here with this call out. Look, when you use the special moves, the Rangers' respective symbols pop up in the background, but they're the wrong ones. They're the old symbols, not the movie ones. Continuity error. Except for the White Ranger.
We interrupt this review for breaking news. I'm just now being informed that I in fact do not know the difference between a badass and a hopeless nerd. Wait a minute. Hey!
So now you see how faithful these games are to their source material, though I think it'll be a much bigger issue when we get to the console versions. But for now, let's move on to a more important aspect, shall we? Badass rant over. Now, I think it's pretty safe to assume that we all know who won the handheld race. But that doesn't mean Nintendo had the edge, like obviously with the visuals. One would think that the Game Gear has a clear advantage here, because obviously it's in color, which is pretty useful for telling the Rangers apart. Seriously, aside from the White Ranger, can you tell which Ranger I'm playing as? How about in their civilian mode? Well, I'd love to tell you too, but I'm not going to scrub through all this footage to figure it out myself. And really, it doesn't matter anyway, since they all pretty much play the same way anyway. But there's more to the Game Gear version here than just color. The sprites are much more detailed, especially the Zords, which look way better in this version than they do in the Game Boy version. Just look at the difference. The game also takes advantage of the Game Gear's extra power by having some pretty cool looking cutscenes. Look at these Zords coming together. That's just awesome. And let's be real here, it looks better than the actual movie. But still, it's not perfect. The Game Gear is a fighter, so obviously the main focus is going to be making the characters look good. But as a result, they kind of overshadow the backgrounds. Though for what it's worth, they look fine too. They fit in well and look good for the time in the system, and they do their job as far as fighting games are concerned. And despite the disadvantages, let's not rag on the Game Boy visuals too much. What they lack in contrast, they certainly make up for in diversity. This is partially due to the gameplay style, of course, which is a side-scrolling platformer beat-em-up. So there's more interaction with the environment, which helps bring it more into focus. On top of that, in order to make the levels feel more unique, they take place in a greater variety of environments with a greater variety of enemies, which all look pretty good, especially on the big screen. But it's a bit of a double-edged sword, really. It's true that each level looks better than the Game Gear games thanks to the variety of settings, but at the same time, they don't really match up with Power Rangers either. Tell me, do you remember when the Power Rangers went crawling through the sewers? They didn't even do that when they teamed up with the Ninja Turtles.
Leonardo! Raphael? So the Mutant Ninja Turtles are for real?
Yeah. Hey, we couldn't believe they were really Power Rangers either.
Yeah, that actually happened. And if I may indulge my badassery once again, it was awesome! Oh, and speaking of TMNT, this game bears a striking resemblance to TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan on the Game Boy. And they even kind of play the same too. again, Mousers. But the major point of noting here, and what really seals the deal in this category, is that the Game Gear version looks better at its native size. Now, I'm all for playing a game the way it was designed to be played, but let's face facts here. Technology has allowed us to make some improvements, and Game Boy games simply look better blown up to a full screen, without the, lime overtone. Especially when you add in that some levels can block visuals with the foreground, making it harder to see the enemies. I mean, even on my TV, I almost missed this enemy. Now try seeing it now. So yeah, the Game Gear graphics are better, as you probably would have guessed. And the same could be said for the music. But it's not so clear cut here either. But not because of technical limitations, so much as design choices. If you've noticed down in the corner, you'll see which game's audio I'm playing in the background throughout the review, as I always do, so you can hear for yourself. But the easiest way to discern each game from the other is that the Game Gear is playing songs from the Power Rangers, and the Game Boy version, not so much. Now each game does have that classic intro theme in all its 8-bit glory, and it's awesome on both games. But only the Game Gear game keeps that trend going by actually using songs from the Power Rangers. And anyone who is a fan of the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers knows how awesome that music was. And obviously, fitting the source material is a major plus. The Game Boy version, on the other hand, opts for its own score, which isn't bad. And they do play the Ranger theme whenever you morph, which is good. But I gotta go back to the fact that if you bought a Power Rangers game, you're probably expecting Power Rangers, which does include the music. It's really as simple as that, but what isn't simple is trying to compare the gameplay. Remember what I said? Apples and oranges? Well, that's mostly true here. Just like each game's predecessor, the Game Boy version is an action platformer, again similar to TMNT, Follow the Foot Clan, or Altered Beast, and the Game Gear version is a tournament fighter, like Street Fighter, but with a few changes. Simply put, it's these differences in the formula that makes these two games comparable at all. After all, as far as any of you are concerned, isn't the better game the one that's in the genre you like best? If you like fighters, obviously you'd pick Game Gear. If you like action platformers, you'd probably go with Game Boy. Well, it's not that simple. The Game Gear version is actually a bit of a tournament fighter beat 'em up hybrid. How so? Well, let's take a look at the first level. As I mentioned before, the first level sets you up against Lord Zedd's monsters, but you don't just immediately fight the monster like you would in a tournament fighter. Instead, putties at a fraction of the health appear one after the other. They go down pretty easy, but the idea is that they can wear you down before the big bad shows up. Though you will recover a fraction of health after you defeat each one, so just don't get your butt kicked and you'll be fine. This concept goes even further in the second stage, as putties and the monster Goldar keep jumping in and out of battle to weaken you further. Honestly, this stage, the second one, is in my opinion the hardest stage with a stupid difficulty spike, which will probably turn off most players right at the beginning. But if you can get past that though, it's fine. Now complementing this style is the Zord battles. Once again, breaking away from the norm, you don't just fight a standard 2-round set. Instead, after you've beaten the monster as a ranger, the second fight has you as either the Thunder Megazord or the Ninja Megazord, depending on the level. Though, a minor complaint, if you're gonna include the Thunder Megazord, why not the Tiger Zord or the Thunder Tigazord? The previous games gave you a choice of multiple Zords. But whatever, it still works in a breaks up the formula kind of way. The fourth level doesn't even have a big bad, it just has 2 rounds against the Oozemen, and the 5th and 6th levels are just Zord fights. First against Hornitron? Truly the embodiment of every Power Ranger fan going through puberty when the Pink Ranger showed up. Come on, you know it's true. And after that, a fight against the final boss where Ooze gets involved.
Oh, I'm gonna be sick.
And then you're done. Heh. So yeah, non-traditional tournament fighter to say the least. But for what it's worth, yeah, I'd still put it in that camp. When you're not doing the campaign, the single player versus mode is exactly what you think it is, a tournament fighter gauntlet. Fun thing to mention though, to my knowledge, this is the only game where you can see a putty patroller and an Oozeman go at it. In a fight. And the player versus player is, well, let's be real here. Has anyone ever actually linked cable to Game Gears together before? Yes, I have in fact played this game as a kid with friends. And yes, I do have friends. But let's get serious for a sec. How many of you even knew the Game Gear had a link cable? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now, I'm no fighting game expert, but I definitely need to mention that fighting game fans probably won't find too much here to sink their teeth into. Though I suppose it would be an interesting surprise game for game tournaments, you know, food for thought. But what I really mean here is that there isn't that much depth. I mean, there's only 2 buttons after all, 1 and 2, plus hitting them at the same time. But for what it's worth, the controls are tight and responsive. And I know this because even I was able to pull off the specials. And I suck at fighting games. Also, it kind of helps that there's only 1 special combo for every character, which is down forward down. Though it works for each button, and when the special gauge is glowing, it unleashes a super move. And well, that's about it. Good for beginners, and definitely for the age group that this game was made for, but not for veteran players. Oh, and each character is unique, but not to the extent you'd see from games today. But that's still more than what can be said for the Game Boy game. And by that I mean, all the characters basically play the same, and the only difference that I could find was that a few of the Rangers can jump higher than others, which is pretty useful, especially against Goldar. However, the White Ranger, the only distinct looking one, of course can't do this. But regardless, this game pretty much plays like what you'd expect from a side-scroller. Each stage you begin the level as a ranger in their ninja garb, which again is a pretty nice reference to the movie and the only game where you can do that, but unfortunately all it really is a weaker state, like Mini Mario. And as you traverse each stage and beat down foes, your power meter gradually fills until you can morph, which boosts your power and refills your health. And here's where a nice little nugget of strategy hides. You can save your morph for when you need to refill your health. However, when you are morphed, getting your power gauge filled up will allow you to use your super attack. Just check out Piggy here. He was such a breeze that I could save my special just to finish him off. I didn't even need to use it, I just wanted to add insult to injury. But still, for harder bosses, Goldar, it's best to weigh your options since there's only so many enemies available. Health or special, it's your choice. Though then again, death isn't exactly a penalty. If you die at any point, you'll start back at the last screen you were at. You have infinite continues and a password system, so it shouldn't take you too long to polish this one off. Which again, made for kids, so what do you really expect? Except, I couldn't beat this game as a kid. And now I finally understand why. This game is frustratingly cheap. Yes, the biggest downfall to the Game Boy version is just how cheap the deaths feel, which comes on from 2 fronts. First, the platforming, which is a result of stiff controls. Seriously, it's so easy to just walk off the ledge, even when you're slamming the jump button. And look at this scenario. The drill is coming at me and I need to punch away the dirt. I have a system, but just watch. You see what I mean? And I just gotta show off this death too. Seriously, what killed me? And there literally isn't any reason to be riding this thing either. It's just a straight walk. So dumb. I'd bet many of you have experienced this in some game or another. When you get hit by something, and then it hits you again, and again, before you can even recover? Yeah, that's in here too. Which is why Goldar is such a pain. Do not let him get you in a corner. And this frustration really is my biggest fault with the game. A lot of it feels cheap. Deaths just feel cheap. And since the rest of the game is simply straight paths with a jump and kick here and there, it kinda makes the problem stand out that much more. Add in the fact that, well, there isn't that much Power Ranger stuff in it, and it kinda just begins to lose its charm. And I know plenty of games add in extra stuff to pad out the licenses, and that's fine. When it comes down to it, taking liberties with the source material is fine if it makes the game better. But not so much when the faults still exist, especially when the challenge only exists with the frustration and cheapness. Take that away, and everything else is a breeze. Well, except Ooze, he's actually a fun challenge. But I digress. It just makes it that much harder to enjoy. Comparably, the Game Gear version's only real sore spot is that difficulty spike in the second stage, but that's it. Which leads me to my final verdict. The Game Gear version of Power Rangers the movie is the superior game of the two. It follows the source material better in both story and music, the color gives it an edge for playing today, and the controls are solid. But most of all, it's not obnoxiously frustrating, which is really what seals it for the Game Boy version. Plus, there's some decent replayability here, with the option to play tournament mode as the monsters, as well as play with friends, where the Game Boy version really only has the curiosity of finding out what each ranger says when you use them to beat Ooze, which isn't much. And once again, I gotta remind everyone that I am not the biggest fan of fighting games. Oh, I like them, but I love platformers and action games. But that bias doesn't change the fact that the Game Gear version is the better game. Though not to kill the Game Gear's glory or anything, the real truth here is that, comparing or not, this is still a review. And honestly, though good for their time, neither of these games really hold up that well. And not that they're bad, it's just that they're way too easy for adults. You know, those of us who were kids when these games came out. But as far as kids go, these are solid titles, though the Game Gear one much more so. But neither can really hold a candle to their console counterparts. So join me next time for part 2, where we'll look at Power Rangers the movie on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. If you actually consider both of them to be Power Ranger games. But who knows? Guess you'll just have to wait and see. Hey everyone, Spammer D again. I hope you all enjoyed that little comparison, and I really hope you're looking forward to the battle between the big boys. But until then, if you haven't had your Power Rangers fill yet, why not check out my review of the Japanese exclusive Power Rangers game on the Famicom? It's an interesting one. Also, be sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me if you think the new movie's gonna be good or not. Personally, I'm hoping for the best. Fingers crossed.
Ah, here comes that cute little Pink Ranger to the rescue.
Oh, you think she's cute too, huh?